Welcome to today's webinar on the Legal Department of the Future Now. I am Karen Moore from Thomson Reuters, and I'm joined today by Howard McKay, Sarah Rosser, and Sarah Barrett-Vane. Howard McKay recently joined NSC Global as head of its legal team. Before NSC Global, Howard was at BT, where he was responsible for managing the legal team, assisting BT's push into cybersecurity and negotiating BT's most complex SaaS transactions. Howard was a member of BT Legal's 2020 Law Group. The group is responsible for evaluating the risks and opportunities associated with the transformation of the legal market. Sarah Rosser is a qualified lawyer with an MBA. Sarah has held a number of senior international roles at Vodafone over a 15-year period, including leading a legal team of 33 as head of the enterprise legal team, head of the global enterprise legal team for US and Asia Pac, and head of global enterprise compliance. Sarah has been described by the Legal 500 as an in-house trailblazer with a track record of transnational legal leadership. And Sarah Barrett-Vane is also a former lawyer. Until about a year ago, Sarah was the Director of Legal Operations at Royal Mail plc, where she worked alongside two successive general counsels, transforming the legal team, its way of working and legal panel arrangements, both before and after the privatization of the Royal Mail. She now provides consultancy services and interim assignments for in-house legal departments, law firms, and legal tech and technology companies. So today's webinar will look at how legal departments are evolving in the services they provide to their businesses and how they're providing these services, particularly in the age of data and technology. For all of you dialing in, please do use the Q&A function to send in your questions as they occur to you, and we'll get to them to answer as many of them as possible at the end. We're also going to be polling for your views on a number of questions, so watch out for these as they come up on your screen. Actually, let's start with making sure that our technology is working properly by kicking off with the first poll question. So, when it comes to legal tech, what is your current primary area of focus? You should see the poll question come up on your screens now, and there should be a selection to choose from. So the options available are you looking at document management systems, contract, document automation, contract lifecycle management, artificial intelligence, workflow tools, case management systems, e-billing systems, robotic process automation, or anything else? We'll just give us a minute to load up. Looks like we have a clear winner in document management systems, and followed closely by contract and document automation. Contract lifecycle management comes in a third, and quite a lot of people are looking at AI. Very interesting. So, moving on to the panel. One of the main benefits of working with technology is that it can actually enable better access to data. Do you think that legal departments are adopting a more data-driven approach in what they do? Are legal departments using data to drive decision-making and reporting to their business? And if so, do you have some examples to share? Let's go to Sarah Barrett-Vane for the broad market overview.
Yes, Karen, I think things have changed and are continuing to change, and I don't think this will stop. It's all about data, and more GCs are realizing this. You know, your operations units, sales, finance, and all business units have data, and historically, group legal hasn't had any, or at least not very accurate data, and they need it to be able to speak to their audience in a language they understand and to be able to show return on investment to the CEO. I think that now in-house teams very much need to be run more as a business than as a service function. So to demonstrate ROI and what they need to show, they have to show what they've achieved so far and what they aim to achieve. So data gives you facts and figures and percentages, and it's very easy to tell a story to that type of audience. If you want to know what types of data I've seen GCs looking at, I've got a fairly long list. In a nutshell, you know, whatever has a number to it, capture it. So spend, the number of matters you're working on, the matters per team member, the time they take to resolve, the cost per matter, the income or saving, the percentage saving or increase compared to last year or last quarter. things like how many claims have you lost and won, how much have you spent, what, where, why, and then importantly, what could you do differently with this knowledge? Areas that GCs are very much looking into, I think, and the poll probably represents this, are how many contracts are you working on, for who and why, and what business unit spends what on what, and how long does it take you to close a contract and bring the revenue in? I think a question that most GCs might be being asked now, particularly with Brexit situation, would be, how many contracts do we have as a business? What are their values, their key terms, price change provisions, and renewal dates? So I think they're all examples of data that people are now looking at because they appreciate they need it to have the conversations they ought to be having.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah Rosser, from your days in practice, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. What Sarah just said, we introduced a lot of manual reporting first and foremost in my previous role just on Excel spreadsheets. So it was a bit of a tedious admin exercise, but from that raw data we created, we were able to produce the kind of monthly updates that Sarah just talked about that we could share with senior management teams. And we then, from the raw data, you can create your own KPIs. So you can show, as Sarah gave various examples, total value of contracts you're working on, average turnaround time for contracts, the number of disputes, what's the amount of those disputes. And it really changes the game in terms of the conversation you can have with senior stakeholders. So, previously at a senior management meeting, I would say the team were really busy. But then with data, you can say it's a 20% increase on what we were doing last month with a longer lead time. And if we had more people, we could decrease that lead time and get revenue through the door quicker. So it gives you a lot of influence when you have that data to support some of the trends that you're seeing in your legal team. And the other example of adopting a kind of data-driven approach was we came to the realization that we had a lot of important customer data in our contracts. So we started extracting that data. So we had a minimum of 30 data points from our simpler contracts and up to 100 from our more complex. And then we used that to feed that data back to the commercial team and the sales team so they could really see what their renewal dates were, what their obligations were to the customers in the contract. So we used data to improve the experience for our customers as well. I just wanted to make one important point that I think on data. It sounds so simple to capture it, but we're all familiar with the rubbish in, rubbish out model. You've got to make sure it's up to date and accurate because if you get rubbish in, it will start telling you things that aren't really true. So, just beware. Data is great, but it has to be the right data and it has to be accurate data.
Thank you, Sarah. So Howard, you've just you're leading a new team now. Do you have any aspirations about what kind of data you'd like to be capturing for your new team?
Thanks. In the last couple of weeks, I've been engaging with my key stakeholders to discuss various issues and expectations. Earlier on in the week, one stakeholder referred me to a quote which I now understand is from W. Edward Deming. "In God we trust, all others bring data." It's thus very clear to me that to deliver my aspirations, I must bring data. Even before those discussions, it was clear to me that it was much easier to engage my stakeholders if I provided them with information aligned to their interests as opposed to prophecies of doom and gloom. Having said that, it's not always viable to secure good data in relatively small legal departments. I can therefore see an opportunity of working with colleagues in other departments, for example finance, to work on joint data-driven recommendations. And I can already see the possibility of proposing solutions to address unpalatable SLA payments.
Thanks, Howard. So looking at the objectives of legal departments, controlling costs, simplifying processes, and demonstrating value, would you agree that these are the main objectives of today's legal department? And should there be other objectives that legal departments should have their eye on? Over to Howard.
Thank you, Karen. I think it's probably fair to say that these are pretty common values that most departments within an organisation should consider key priorities. Over the next few years, I believe the lines between the in-house legal function and the operations it supports will continue to blur. In such circumstances, the legal function will be wise to align with the mindset of the organisation it supports. I'm currently responsible for providing legal support to a sales-led business. In consequence, one of my key objectives will be to improve speed to cash by reducing contract negotiation cycle time. Sarah?
Yes, I agree with exactly what you said, Howard. I mean, I don't think it's all about cost, but we do hear about it a lot. But for me, I think they are key focus areas. I know that some GCs are not necessarily under pressure to cut budget, but simply to do the right thing. So reduce risk, deliver the company's objectives, increase profitability. And it's all about delivering legal solutions and not necessarily legal advice. So just as Howard mentioned, I would urge GCs to be thinking about business enablers. So reducing cycle time, bringing revenue in faster, reducing fraud, signing contracts faster, creating better working relationships with the suppliers, and then, of course, automating standard processes to free up people's time and reduce repetitive work. I think that legal teams have a lot of power here because they can actually assist and enable the business to perform work themselves by skilling them up and working with them to enable them to do more, such as in the areas of contract drafting, procurement, HR, standard agreements, and repeat advice, like in the poll when we saw that a lot of people are looking at contract automation, which is good to see. I also think that there are other objectives, and I know a lot of people would probably put these into the soft skills category maybe, but objectives around people, talent, staff retention. Have you got the right people in the place doing the right task? I think that's very important so that the GC can give the team and the business the tools they need.
Sarah, I've often heard you paraphrase this as focusing on doing the right thing.
Yes, it's the right work, right time, right place, all that. Everything was right at the beginning of it.
Yes. Sarah Rossa, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with both what Sarah and Howard said. I think, these are very much the objectives in my previous role, and I think they're important to everyone and at the heart of running a good legal team. They're obviously not the only objectives for people, and I think there are unique challenges that our listeners will be dealing with in their own businesses and their own legal teams. And I think it's important, what are your problems that you need to focus on and solve? It might be, as Sarah mentioned, recruiting and retaining talent, or for some, getting closer to your business stakeholders and understanding where the risks are and what the objectives are. They're important, they're key, they're something that we all need to create as best practice, but they're by no means the only objectives, I think, to run an in-house legal team.
Thank you. So breaking these down a little bit further, looking at cost controls, Sarah Barrett-Vane, do you have an idea about what kinds of measures legal departments are using to help with cost controls?
Yeah, in terms of what measures I've implemented, it's probably easy to say what measures I haven't implemented because I've probably done most of the things that are on the list. I mean, I'd start with something as simple as spend management, which could just be a simple thing like issuing fresh billing rules to your panel firms and understand your spend, the whole, who, where, what, when, why. But that's both internal and external. It's only once you understand what you're spending that you can think about what needs to change, and easy process improvements can go a long way. Things like issuing guidance, putting policies and simple procedures in place will enable you to monitor spend, and then you can monitor improvements and continue to make incremental changes. At Royal Mail, I think everyone knows I did a lot to control external spend with 2 GCs. So looking at what work is going where. And I think, the question for GCs in 2018 is, are they missing a trick, perhaps not taking advantage of the vast array of legal services providers and solutions that are out there? It's not just that you go to law firms anymore. You've got a whole basket of solutions. You could consider doing a panel review if needs be. If you've got the wrong law firms on board, carry out a legal panel review or just a refresh. You may need to do this if you've got to completely get a handle on your costs. But then after that, how do you instruct your suppliers in terms of controlling costs? Are you agreeing scope and fees in advance? Are you sticking to budgets, or are costs spiralling? And then turning the magnifying glass on yourself with internal costs. Who's doing what work? Can it be done differently? Do you need to hire different levels of staff with different skill sets? Are you too top-heavy on lawyers, but low on support staff or people with operational data and finance skills? And there are so many freelancers out there now. You don't need to leap to hire to get the right person on board, even just for a while. And then legal tech, which I know we'll come to later, but that can definitely help with cost control. E-billing is tremendously useful, but there are an awful lot of other solutions out there that can reduce costs, such as contract automation and tools like that.
Sarah Rosser, have you got examples of the types of controls that you've implemented to help with costs?
Yeah, absolutely. So an internal example when we kind of looked in at ourselves and what we were doing, how we were doing it, as an example that Sarah mentioned. So we were continually being challenged to do more with less, as the saying goes. And one thing we wanted to do was reduce our reliance on external law firms and contractors to deal with the peaks of workload in the team, and also some of the large, more complicated matters which we wanted our legal team to be able to experience and participate in. So we started a big project to look at everyone's role, literally down to task level detail. And when we kind of analysed the tasks that we were doing, we found that there were a lot of tasks that we could actually stop doing. Historically, the business had asked us to check marketing copy, which actually we didn't need to do, and somebody else could do it, and we could introduce some guidelines. We introduced a lot of self-serve templates and guidance notes and guidances. And then we realized that some tasks could be moved, so we didn't need to do them at all because maybe they were done in another part of the organization as well. And from that analysis, we were able to, as Sarah said, put the right task to the right person at the right time. So we reassigned some work to paralegals that previously junior lawyers might have done. We took some work from senior lawyers to junior lawyers so they could manage more complex deals and matters. And then it meant it freed up the senior lawyers to deal with the work that previously we might have outsourced to external law firms or to get a contractor in to manage. So following that realignment exercise, when we put all the tasks to the right people in the right place, that's when we introduced tech, and that's when we introduced a contract management workflow tool to assist both with the self-serve and the processing of volume contracts.
Howard, have you done anything similar or different?
Oh, in my current role, I can honestly say none. But then I guess I've only been there 2 weeks. I am, however, fortunate to draw inspiration from my time working with British Telecom's 2020 legal project team, which you mentioned earlier, which was tasked at looking at the risks and opportunities presented by the anticipated changes to the legal market. And what I can say is that I've already had preliminary discussions with both an artificial intelligence software provider and an alternative services provider in order to investigate potential efficiencies. And I think that is essential given the nature of the small team that I'm currently working for.
That's great. We lasted about 20 minutes into the session before somebody mentioned AI, which is great. So let's go to the audience. For all of you dialing in, how many of you are actually actively using an AI form of tech, whatever that might be, and will be thinking of doing that in the next 5 years? So do you think your legal team will have any form of AI tech in the next 5 years? Yes, no, or are you a bit unsure at this stage? Wow, that's a very good result, much better than was in some conferences where they've been asking this question. We have 1 in 10 people were playing with the legal AI. So we have, the results are 39.7 of you are using legal tech in the next 5 years, 23 not, and 36 not sure. Okay. So the three of you all mentioned process simplification and looking at task evaluation to make sure that your legal department workflows are as efficient as they can be. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on why you think that's necessary and how to go about doing that? Sarah Barrett-Vane?
Yes, I think some in-house teams are evaluating their workflows in this way, and we read a lot about what the mostly large companies have done in this area. I think it takes a brave decision for a GC to really look at his or her own team and see what changes need to be made. It's easy to change your external suppliers, or relatively easy, but internally requires difficult conversations, and we all know that a lot of people don't like change. However, I think this needs to be done, and I'm greatly in favour of the exercise that most people call unbundling their work, disaggregating, whatever you want to call it. Whether you go old school with whiteboards and post-it notes, or do a halfway house with a work activity spreadsheet so you can understand what people are doing, or whether you go all out and buy workflow tracking legal tech, there is a solution to suit you. And as often, my message is, start small, do a pilot and see what happens. But I think the thing is, most in-house teams really should be looking at this, because once you've done it, it will really assist you with your decision making. Because, as we've mentioned briefly before, once you know what people are doing, internally and externally, then you can really analyse the how, when and where. What is it costing? How efficiently is the work being done? How long do the various tasks take? And then, what would you do differently? And I would encourage teams, to get their team members on board, participating and encouraging innovative ideas. And as I alluded to earlier, there are so many options now for the in-house team to consider. So many providers out there, from traditional law firms to the new law providers, alternatives, the bar, legal tech solutions, managed legal services, LPOs, freelance temporary staff with all sorts of skill sets. But the important thing is to look at where you are now, which takes time, then look at where you want to be, then list out all your options and then take action. You can't just listen to a webinar and take action. You've got to do things in the various stages, or you'll probably find something will go wrong.
Sarah Rosser, you've had a lot of experience doing this at Vodafone. Do you have any top tips on how to get this right?
That's a really good question. I think, like Sarah said, you kind of just need to dive into the process and first of all map what you've got. So whether you do that by the post-it notes or workflow charts, you just really need to understand what that task is already. We did this when we looked, prior to doing the tech, we looked at our contract workflow. So we looked at how we were receiving the instructions from our sales teams. We looked at how we were managing allocations for the triage bit, who that was going to, how were we deciding who it was going to, how we were creating templates. I mean, for most people, just trying to find the template, trying to find the right one, and then the cutting and pasting to put the right template together in its own right is a workflow that you could dive into and find lots of benefits and lots of time savings. From the templates, we looked at approvals, we looked at signature, we looked at extracting data, and we looked at storage. So we took a whole chunk of our workflow and really evaluated how we were doing it and then how we should be doing it before we put it into the technology. And I think that's really important that you do that if you're thinking about adopting technology, because otherwise you risk kind of embedding that bad process into tech, and then you won't see the improvements that you were really hoping for. I think the other thing to mention is, even the simplest of process steps, if you remove a 10-minute task that somebody is doing 5 times a week and you've got a whole team of 20 people doing it, that's a huge time saving across a month and across a year for the team, even with making little tweaks to process. So absolutely something that needs to be looked at and should be done.
Howard, would you be doing this for your new team also?
Yes, I think it's absolutely essential. Perhaps it's because I was brought up in a Victorian ethos household, but I detest waste and inefficiency. I think first and foremost, I agree with Sarah. There is absolutely no point in trying to automate processes and chuck technology at systems until they're fit for purpose. You're going to disincentivize people to using technology, and you are going to embed those bad processes in. So I think that's one of the most important things. I anticipate the legal teams will be required to assist business transverse an ever-increasing matrix of regulations and risks under highly constrained costs. and as such, in-house lawyers are going to need to make sure that the right kind of work is directed to the right supplier at the right time. And in that vein, I think many in-house legal departments will inevitably consider using a mix of multi-sourcing and legal technology going forwards.
It sounds like legal departments will have a very busy time ahead of them, in addition to doing all these process improvements and implementing tech, and also doing their day job as advisory lawyers and regulatory lawyers, etc. How would you communicate all that you're doing to the business? Do you need a communication strategy to make sure that the business is aware of the value that your department is delivering? And are there any particular strategies that you found to have worked well for you? Let's go to Sarah Barrett-Vane.
Yeah, I think in-house teams need a combination of formal and informal discussions with reports, I think, with the business. Firstly, I mean, it's all about conversations. It would be ideal if you'd spoken to the business heads and leaders to discuss what they actually need from group legal, because the two sets of people really need to be aligned so that they're heading in the same direction, ideally the same direction as the company. So if you've got agreed outputs, deliverables and KPIs, that's all done. You just need to report against them. I also think it's worth mentioning that you should agree with your business heads what you're not doing, which is equally as important as what you are doing. And then once you've agreed, monitor it, report on progress. Very important to speak the business client's language. So, if they want PowerPoint, Excel, graphs, pies, dashboards, give it to them in a format they understand. I recommend that GCs, log their results and successes. A shared spreadsheet is all you need at the start. And my message is always, don't be afraid to shout about your successes, and very much do it before someone else does. In terms of, the stories that they can tell the business once they've proved themselves, just things like, how they've contributed to the bottom line. The facts and figures tell the story. Examples I've used in my past and recent work are things like, have you reduced claims and damages paid out? Have you sold valuable properties in record time? Have you built revenue-generating properties in record time? Have you entered into contracts faster than usual? Have you won litigation? Have you skilled up your business? Have you trained them? Have you got them working smarter and faster? I think it's very important to get your business colleagues on side so that they can actually help you tell your story. And examples like, if you automate contracts, if you've reduced contract signature from 70 days to 17 days, then tell the powers that be how much more quickly revenue is coming in, and bring examples to life. And if you can get your business colleagues to support you on this, I think it's a far more powerful message.
Sarah Rosser.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's great to have a communication strategy so you're showing the value in your business, in your legal team, and how you're adding and contributing to the business. Data really, really helps with that. I mean, in my previous roles, we had monthly management update packs that contained all the good information that Sarah just mentioned. What disputes you were winning, how much money we were saving the business as a result, how many, what was the total value of contracts that we were working on. I mean, the one thing to note is when you do that, you obviously have to also give bad press sometimes as well, and you have to take the hit on that when things aren't going so well. So there's that element of transparency when you go into a communication strategy, but it's important to show that as well as the successes, I think, and the struggles that you're facing in the team. We had some internal newsletters just for ourselves as a legal team, celebrate successes just amongst ourselves. There was a Yammer post, and I know, there's lots of tools now within organisations to share updates that you can kind of do a little bit more on the fly without so much preparation. They were good tools to use just to, say that a deal had been closed and how much work people had put into those deals. So I think, it makes you part of the organisation. It's key to getting your successes out there and your message out there as to how you're contributing. So really important thing to do.
To you, Howard?
When I first heard the question, it reminded me of the seminal works of one of the 21st century's foremost poets, Jessie J, when she said, "It's all about the money." Now, I'm not sure if it will work for a sales-motivated company, but it certainly rings true to me. From my perspective, it's imperative for my team to convey its strategy in a way which demonstrates how my team has delivered dollars and cents to the company. And as I mentioned earlier, you have to align to the aspirations and intentions of the business in this day and age, in my opinion.
So, just there are other cost centres in businesses, IT, finance, procurement. How do they do it? How do they communicate their value to the business? Does legal need to coordinate better with them, or maybe even piggyback on some of these communications? What do you think? Sarah Rosser?
I think this goes back to data, so I think we can learn a lot from these departments, because I think, it's second nature to them to collect a lot of data on customers, suppliers, cost and spend across the organisation. And they know and are used to manipulating those data pools to show business insights and, lessons learned, and present that back. I don't think it's a second nature yet for most legal teams, but we are getting there as we're learning to, collect data and then use it wisely. So I would say for the moment, learn from those departments. If they're doing it well, don't be afraid to copy what they're doing. And it gives you an idea how you can develop your own insights based on this unique view that legal has across the whole organisation of what's going on, and then to start presenting it back. So I think some legal departments are already doing, quarterly business reviews where they're using their data to present back in a way that finance and procurement IT would traditionally do. So I think we'll see more of that too.
Do you, Sarah, about to say?
Yeah, just as Sarah Rosser said, I have experience of, the quarterly business reviews, the QBRs, and I think a lot of large legal teams have that. So you're actually encouraged, along with all the other teams, to present on your achievements to the C-suite, and it does tend to be achievements rather than failures, as you can imagine. I think even if you don't have a company that has an effective QBR process in place, then suggest it, because once you've aligned your goals and objectives with that, it makes it quite easy to focus your mind. A practical warning is that you may well see your successes listed by other teams, so I would suggest you get your contribution in there fast. But this is where it would be really ideal if everyone acted as a team, because it's not particularly cool to be seen to be fighting over achievements. So if you and property, or you and IT, or you and HR, whoever it is, can actually present an achievement as a unified function, that would be so much better. As other Sarah said as well, it's all about data. It's all about telling a credible story. I'm very much in favour of stories. So rather than facts and figures, if you can actually say, this is where we were, this is where we wanted to be, this is where we are now, try and find a nice story that actually reads well, so that people, not in the legal team, can really understand it. And I would always say that it's very important to relate your story to the business, not just to legal. It's not a legal achievement, it's legal's achievement for the business. And in terms of comms, I would always say, the perfect message is simple. So, I have a slide that I put up that just says, clear data plus a simple story equals the perfect message. Tailor it to your audience, graphs, charts, bullets, words, whatever they like. And in an ideal world, if you know what your CEO or CFO wants to achieve, if you're aligned with that, then you're simply giving him, her what they wanted, which is, pretty ideal, isn't it?
Sounds good. Howard, how aligned are you with your new finance, sales, HR, etc. colleagues?
It's early days. If I'm honest, I think in small legal departments there definitely is a real advantage in piggybacking off the activities of other departments. And as Sarah said, I think making sure that there's an alignment, that there's a line of communication in working out how I can add value to the other cost centres' demonstration of value, I think is the likely way to go forward in the small legal departments. At this stage, I've already had preliminary discussions with my finance team, because I think of cost centres that I've identified so far, they're probably the easiest to align to in conveying a mixed legal and financial message.
Thank you, Howard. So we're going to our last poll question for this session. That is, of the priorities that the panel has discussed today, which would you rank as the most important? We have controlling costs, simplifying processes and creating efficiency, demonstrating value, reducing cycle time, or other? If you've got an interesting other, do come tell us about it through the Q&A. Right, simplifying processes and creating efficiencies have come out as a top winner. So, panel, when you think about the new normal, the legal services landscape, have you got any top tips on how legal departments can decide what is the right approach for them? Some top tips on how to harness legal tech to become the legal department of the future now? Howard?
Yeah, I guess my watchwords would be focus, simplify, and invest time in tech. But to take those in more detail, I think we can all agree that implementing change is often problematic, and so it's advantageous to focus on the low-hanging fruits rather than to boil the ocean. My standard strategy is therefore to identify the easiest solution which has a material beneficial impact. In terms of simplification, as we said earlier, there is absolutely no point in throwing technology as an inefficient process. It's unlikely to work and it's going to cost you money. Regarding technology, whilst the exact nature and timing of the adoption of technology within the legal community is uncertain, I think the direction of travel is clear and it is coming our way. I think there are material advantages to be attained through use of technology, and the legal department would be wise to invest time with some of those options. From my experience, the adoption of legal technology doesn't always have to come at a material cost. Often technology solutions can be implemented from existing software, and that's something that should certainly be considered for any cash-strapped operation. Sarah?
Yeah, my buzzwords are the third bullet on the slide. So for me, it all boils down to people, processes, and technology. So it's about having the right people doing the right type of work, the right processes, and the right technology supporting you. I always tell in-house teams, don't leap to buy legal tech. Think about your main problem areas and then ask yourself how you should fix them, which is likely to be a combination of people, process, and tech, but importantly, not just tech. The question is, should and can technology be part of the solution? Unfortunately, this all takes time, and of course, most GCs are under pressure to do everything a month ago, and everything, of course, has to be done by year end. That's always my particular favourite. But you do need to take the time to think about what you need, do your research, and ask people to help you. Peer networks is very important. And then buy the right tech, but before you buy anything, do make sure you've got a technology implementation person or manager on hand to see this through for you. These are projects that require proper implementation. I often laugh at the idea that someone can give it to a lawyer as a part-time career development opportunity. Not really. And I have a lot of experience of people saying that legal tech has gone wrong or it doesn't do what the vendors promised. But in my experience, that's not often the case. It's often because it wasn't implemented properly. So my message is take your time and get it right.
Sarah Rosser, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, know what problem you're trying to solve, and don't just choose tech for tech's sake. I think it's a buzzword at the moment, legal tech, and lots of people are looking at it. But what is it you're actually trying to solve, and is tech the answer? As Howard mentioned, look at what tech is already in your organisation and what's at your disposal. It might surprise you, some of the things that existing tech can do for you. And to Sarah's point, it's not just about the technology. If you're choosing a supplier, make sure you have a good relationship with them. You will need a team to implement this, and you will run into challenges. And the way you resolve challenges is through having good relationships with the people that you're working with to resolve those challenges and come up with solutions to them. That was the best piece of advice I was given when we were looking at legal tech, and I still think that rings true post the project. So really give that some consideration. And then tech, still is used by people. So at the end of the day, it's end users that have to use that technology. So, get their input early, get them looking at the system, seeing what they think of it, get their feedback, and get them understanding, what it is you're trying to do, to get their buy-in at a very early stage.
Thank you, Sarah. We have received actually quite a few questions from people dialing in, and we'll try to get to them now. One that's come in for Sarah Barrett-Vane. What about the legal team of the future?
Yes, what that might look like. I'll answer this, and it will be interesting to see what Sarah and Howard think as well. I'm very much in favour of getting the right people in place, actually, for the in-house team of the future. So being an ex-lawyer and loving lawyers as I do think that there's a great need for fellow professionals. So whether they be called, data analysts, legal operations, supply management people, paralegals, project managers, I think it's important, particularly for large teams, to have people with finance and data analyst skills, because you're able to speak the language of business and finance whilst understanding lawyers and their world. It will be interesting to see who takes that up and what divide you get in the future. Also, in terms of legal teams of the future, I think leadership is exceptionally important. I think you see a lot of examples of senior lawyers being made people managers just because they're of that rank, and maybe it would be better to have people with genuine management skills and the desire to mentor people to see them progress and succeed. It would be interesting for GCs to encourage some members of their team to go sideways into, for example, technology, automation, legal ops, legal procurement. And I'm also well-rounded individuals in legal teams. So, people trained in the right subject, dare I say, lawyers trained in Excel, PowerPoint and apps, working agilely, and GCs encouraging an entrepreneurial approach. These are all things I would like to see in the in-house team of the future. Don't know if Howard or Sarah would like to add to that.
Actually, we need to get to quite a few of the questions. We've got loads coming in, so we'll try and answer a different one possibly. Going to Sarah Rosser, can you comment on the use of offshoring to reduce costs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, this goes back to what your problem is. If it is cost, then obviously labour arbitrage, so doing something cheaper somewhere else, whether that be onshore or offshore, is obviously an option if cost is your problem that you want to address. I think what's really interesting is we've seen the increase in in-house legal teams in terms of size, because it was so costly to put the business out to external law firms. Now in-house legal teams have grown for some large corporates into what is a small law firm. Whether we'll see the next kind of phase of that is people looking at the size of the in-house legal team and then decreasing the size to go offshore to deal with some less complex and less risky matters in different ways. And I think we've seen that trend and see lots of organisations already adopting that approach. I think what's interesting for alternative legal service providers is whether they then start eating their own lunch and start adopting technology to drive down the costs as well as giving a labour arbitrage benefit.
Thank you, Sarah. Another people-related question. Many of you talked about automating processes. How do you see the roles of paralegals and other junior officers evolving and changing? Maybe Howard would like to take this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think certainly for the near-stroke foreseeable future, I see technology augmenting, not replacing individuals. I think the technology isn't there yet, to what I've seen, that doesn't need a smart mind controlling and evaluating whether or not the output is effective. In the future, I guess what I'd be looking at as a paralegal is, hey, this is my chance to move up the value chain. This is how I can actually do things which are more complex, using technology to help me generate more complex outputs. So I think as long as paralegals and such staff adopt and adapt to the future, then I think technology can be a great thing to make their lives better.
Do either of the Sarahs have anything to add to that? Okay, so going on to the next question. Do you have any concrete examples of how to show how legal adds value to the business? Would Sarah Barrett-Vane like to take that?
I mean, yes, I can create a full spreadsheet, picture it, so most of the things I've mentioned, but more. I mean, it depends obviously what your business is doing, but if you are big on properties, you can talk about property transactions, property sales and leasebacks, speed to market, speed to get rent in, speed to get money out or whatever. If you're into contracts, then it's mostly about the things that, we've all three discussed today. How many contracts have you done, what value, how quickly have you got them signed, how quickly have you brought revenue in. If you've got litigation, are you litigation heavy? Have you actually started litigation that you have won, that has brought in money, that has paid your costs? If you are frequently sued, are you winning litigation? Are you therefore saving damages? Are you saving costs? If you've had, if you're very compliant, so therefore you've avoided fines. I mean, really, it depends what portfolio of work your in-house team has. Just log the successes on a manual spreadsheet if you want to every month. Encourage your lawyers and other staff to do that. Give them the columns so they don't go off piece and start talking about anything. And just log the successes and results in every category you can, and then have a sifting process so that you only talk about the best things that will actually resonate with the business, and bring these up at your quarterly business review. So again, that's a simple process that anyone can implement at any time. I think it's getting used to seeing yourself as a salesperson rather than just a lawyer. You are talking about what legal solutions you have created and how you've contributed to the bottom line, either by savings or income. That's the sort of spreadsheet I would picture.
Thank you, Sarah. To Sarah Rosser, that's a great question that's come in, which reads as follows. Shouldn't demonstrating value amount to more than dumbing down purely to bean counting? Not all legal tasks are repetitive, easily measurable, for example, by reference to numbers, single numbers of contracts, matters. What about the efficiencies of not outsourcing, but rather investing in internal know-how?
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. It's just, it's, I guess, more difficult to show that and to evidence that. So we just need to get a bit more creative in how you justify that. If it is about somebody who knows and understands the business, dealing with a particular contract or regulatory matter, then how are you going to kind of show that? A simple discussion, of course, is not off the cards just because we've been talking about data. There is, still the conversation with your chief operating officer or CEO or whomever it is to absolutely justify exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Great. Who would like to take the next one? How do you help the senior leadership of a company move away from the concept that all contracts, no matter how big or small, must go through legal?
I think probably Sarah and I could both do a little bit on this. Mm-hmm. Do you agree, Sarah?
Yes.
Well, communication. Can you leave the question? Oh, it's gone. Okay. I'll have to remember what it was. It was about moving people. There it is. The concept that all contracts. I think there I mentioned the dreaded data word again. But if you're able to say, and so I'm picturing the spreadsheet here. So you're able to say that you've done 300 contracts this year. You've got value bands next to all of them. So you're saying these are the contracts we've done. These are the value bands. This is how we do it at the moment. So a spreadsheet with who does what work would be very useful. So you might have 8-year PQE lawyers, 3-year PQE lawyers, paralegals or whatever doing this work. If you look at their fully loaded cost, i.e., pension, salary and everything, how much of that person's time are they spending looking at these contracts? Then look at the value of the contracts and think to yourself, what is my risk appetite? So do I have a rule that no contracts under 100 grand go to legal because I'm happy with the risk profile? I know a lot of companies, including retails and banks, have actually done that. Pick a value, but they've actually decided that, any contract below X, will no longer be dealt with by legal. It will simply go through contract automation, and it will only be escalated to legal if, conditions X, Y, Z are met. Now, senior leadership, that means that they've got to accept that if it doesn't go through legal, there's a small risk. But bearing in mind that legal will have set up the contract automation process, this is really managed very, very well. But I think it does all come down to the fact of, what do you want your lawyers actually focusing on? And I think most people would rather move them higher up the food chain. And Sarah Rosser, have you got anything to add to that? Because I know you Vodafone did all that, didn't they?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely spot on. I think you've got to ask yourself, because there's a lot of pieces of paper that pass through all legal teams. What is the purpose of what you're doing? What risk are you preventing, or what benefit are you bringing? I think we have to start getting harsh with ourselves about that. Is it of value? Somebody has asked us to do it, but why are we doing it? And not all contracts carry enough risk or generate enough revenue to justify a very senior lawyer taking a look at them. So, to manage them in a different way, whether it's through an automation tool or through an offshore or through a more junior lawyer looking at them, there are ways to do it more efficiently. And like Sarah said, also, not being afraid to just stop doing some of this stuff and saying, there is very little risk in it, and asking the business to accept the fact that we're going to take that risk.
Agreed. I think the last question, we have time to squeeze in one last one, and I think it should go to Howard. It's been quiet for a while. Is there not a balance between simplifying processes and delivering value? Buying tech can be expensive, and it can only be justified if it improves the value being given back to the business. How do you weigh up this conundrum?
Well, I think the first thing is, from my perspective, the whole purpose of me simplifying things. Sorry, you've lost the question. Sorry. Is to deliver value. Essentially, what I'm trying to do is reduce the prospect of failure, improve cycle time by making things simpler for people to adopt, adapt, and deliver. Having said that, the rest of the question is, should I be spending a lot of money on AI? Well, we've already said no. I think there is no point chucking money at tech unless it delivers true value. And as the Sarahs have already said, quite often there's technology that you already have which you can use, which can make things simpler and more efficient. So I certainly would not want to be spending any money on tech unless I know that A, I can deliver it successfully, or have a very confident that I can deliver it successfully, and that will drive value. Because I'm not going to get a lot of chances to get things wrong, and I'm sure a lot of you on the call aren't either. Really got to focus, and really got to think, how much value is this going to deliver, and how much disruption is it going to cause by implementing it? And am I ready, because are my processes right, to adopt and adapt this technology? So don't go spending. Don't open that checkbook until you know it's right.
Sarah, do you agree?
Absolutely right, yeah. Do your homework first, a lot of homework first, do not just buy tech. But I'm all for legal tech. It's brilliant when bought sensibly, and when you've done the prep, and when you've got someone to implement it. It's a no-brainer, but you can't just do it quickly.
Sarah Rosser, final words from you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It will take longer than you think, and you will face more challenges than you think. And I think the day you launch the tech is the day of the start of the project, because that is when end users start experiencing it, and there will be further changes that you want to make, and there will be a period of time where you have to drive adoption of that tech as well. So a lot longer than you think, and dedicate some time to end users and getting people on board once it's launched.
Thank you. We've come to the top of the hour, so we'll have to conclude the webinar now. Thank you very much for dialing in. We will be sending the recording out afterwards, so for anybody who wants to listen to any of the wise words again from our panel, you'll be able to do that at a later opportunity. Thank you.